Howdy folks, today's lesson in the CompTIA Network Plus course is DHCP. In this lesson we'll be talking about the following topics regarding DHCP. The first one is what is DHCP? The second is how does DHCP actually work? The third is where do I access DHCP or go about accessing it? And then lastly, the fourth one will be how do I go about actually configuring the DHCP? Now that we have that out of the way, do me a favor and bump that like button, and while you're at it, maybe also boink that subscribe button so that you'll know when the next lesson in this course comes out. Alright, let's get straight to it. The first topic is what is DHCP? First of all, DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. The DHCP's purpose is to, basically dish out IP addresses to any devices on the network that are set on automatic or, dynamic and that currently has no IP address. In the average medium to large size organization or company, the DHCP will usually be an actual server in the company. And this server would usually have a role installed, and that role, guess what, is called the DHCP role. The point here, for now at least, is it's an actual server, usually in a company environment. If you have a home environment or a small or medium-sized company, it's a whole different can of worms. In those situations, you'll usually find the DHCP to be on your router. The DHCP is a function usually built in to most routers, and it's usually enabled by default. Now let's get to the more complicated stuff. How does DHCP work? Well, it obviously assigns IP addresses to hosts or devices, pretty much the same thing. The devices can be almost anything these days. It's not just limited to desktop PCs and laptops. It could be devices like phones and tablets. It can be printers and scanners. It can even be access points and many more. DHCP server comes as a client and it comes as a server. So the server is the actual DHCP itself. The client is usually going to be the actual device that needs an IP address. So this will all make more sense in a few minutes, so hang on to your underwear if you are confused at this point. Now, with regards to the DHCP server itself, this can be two kinds of devices, which we've mentioned earlier. It can be either a router, like I have in this picture layout for you guys. This is usually the case in, obviously a home or a small office environment like a Soho, being a small office, home office environment. Or it could be an actual server in a company, like in this second picture. Either way, whether it's a router with DHCP built into it and having it enabled, or whether it's an actual DHCP server in the company, they effectively still do the same thing in the end of the day. And that is to do what? To dish out IP addresses to devices. The whole DHCP server concept works in 4 easy steps, and I'll explain all 4 of those steps to you folks in just a moment using the same picture layout we've got in front of us. So for computers and other devices to work over a network, they need what? Well, they need an IP address. Not just any IP address. That address has to be a unique one on the network. Otherwise, you're going to set up a situation where the data that goes to PC1 here at the bottom should actually be going to PC2. PC1 doesn't know what the is going on, and the whole process becomes a mess. Now, we could assign these IP addresses manually. I mean, it's only 2 PCs at the end of the day, so it wouldn't really be that big of a problem, now would it be? But imagine if you had hundreds or even thousands of PCs, which would usually be the case in a company environment. Yeah, we don't want to be doing that. It's going to be insane the amount of work you're going to have as soon as these PCs becomes more than just 2. So how does DHCP sort this out? Each computer will run a DHCP client, And this will allow a computer to ask for an IP address. So this is going to get automated at the end of the day. Somewhere on the network, there usually will be a DHCP server. This is where the IP addresses are managed. Now remember, like we said earlier, DHCP servers can be run on either routers or servers. It generally depends on the size of the network you're working on. At home, it's usually going to be a router that will be your DHCP. The DHCP function, as we said before, is usually built into most routers and is usually also enabled by default. In a company or an enterprise environment, it's usually handled by a server. So when you turn your PC on or connect it to a network via cable or via the network, wireless network, it doesn't usually have an IP address. So what is it going to do? It is going to look for a DHCP server. This will basically be step 1 of the 4 steps I mentioned earlier. You can imagine your PC just shouting out to everyone saying, I need a DHCP server, hoping that somewhere on this network there is a DHCP server. Usually there is. Now this is known as a broadcast message. When your PC shouts out like that over the network saying it needs a DHCP, that is basically a broadcast message. It broadcasts over the whole network and hopes somewhere a DHCP responds to that broadcast. When your PC does that broadcast, all the other devices on the network get that message, not just the DHCP. So all the other PCs even get that broadcast message from your PC. Everything that is not a DHCP server, like the other PCs, for example, they will look at that message, and if they are not a DHCP, they will obviously just go and drop it. This whole procedure I just explained to you guys, that is just step 1. Yeah, just step 1. So step 1 is obviously called DHCP Discover, as you can see here on the side. Now step 2 is called DHCP Offer. So when the DHCP server gets that message, which your PC just broadcasted in step 1, the DHCP server says, cool, brah, I've got some IP addresses. How about this one? It then sends the offer to the host or PC. This once again gets sent out through the whole network, as you guys can see. So even the PCs that didn't initially request this, even they get that IP address, they just won't take it. And if more than one offer is given, the host will choose the first one it receives. Step 3 is the DHCP request. The host says, awesome, I'll take it, and sends the request to the DHCP server. Step 4, the DHCP acknowledgement. The DHCP server sends the IP address to the host along with the subnet mask, the default gateway, and of course the DNS server. Something you should also know is that the DHCP server keeps a record of all the leased IP addresses and their leased times. IPs dished out by the DHCP server are usually temporary and expire after a certain period. What that exact period is, though, depends on what the administrator configured on the DHCP server, but on average you'll find this to be about around 24 hours in most companies. It could be more, it could be less, but it should be about roughly 24 hours. Now, for the folks that are wondering right now what the heck lease time is, the lease time is when the host will have to renew its IP address, otherwise it will expire and ultimately stop working. If the lease, for example, was for 24 hours, which is the default, and you left your PC on throughout the night, and let's say your PC's been on for more than 24 hours now because of that, that IP address would eventually expire. And what you or the user would notice is certain things would stop working. The most common thing would probably be your internet. You would notice the internet doesn't work even though you've got an IP address. Why? Because that IP has expired. So to fix this, you would have to renew that IP address. This can be done in many ways, but the most common way and the easiest way, quite frankly, is to just go and restart that PC. Yep, not joking. So there's a lot of things your PC actually does when it restarts, and one of the things it does when you restart is it releases the old IP address when it turns off, and as soon as it turns back on, it requests a new one automatically. Problem solved. Easy peasy. Alrighty, and then to recap on the 4 steps we just explained here to you folks, what I just explained to you folks, is in general an overview of how DHCP works. Obviously, different vendors and different DHCP settings and scenarios can slightly change these specifics, but overall, the concept remains the same. So the 4 steps was DHCP discover. In this first step, the client looks for a DHCP server. Remember, the client is the device like your PC, obviously. DHCP offer. The DHCP server then offers an address because it received that broadcast from the client being your PC. DHCP request. The PC or host then requests to lease that address, which was just offered in step 2 now. And then lastly, DHCP acknowledgement. The DHCP server now actually sends the actual IP address to the host or PC. So that, folks, is the 4 steps of DHCP explained in a nutshell. That leaves us with the next topic in this video, which was, where do I access DHCP? Now remember, DHCP can be either a router or it can be on an actual server in a company. I'm going to keep saying that because a lot of people don't know that. If you have a router, you're going to want to log in to that router in your home or in your small office environment. This can be done by opening something as simple as your web browser of your choice, of course, and then typing in your router's IP address into the address bar, where you would normally go and type in the address for a website. If you're sitting with a DHCP on an actual server in an actual company environment, you will have to open the DHCP console on that server where the DHCP role has been installed. Now, to be able to do this, you simply just need to open the server manager on that server. You'll notice that the server manager is normally open by default on most servers. Once you have that sucker open, at the top right hand side in the server manager, you'll find there's a tools menu. In that drop down menu, yes, it's a drop down menu, you simply just click on DHCP and that will open, guess what? The DHCP console. I think to help you folks out to better understand this, let me show you what both of these would more or less look like. So let's start with the first one here, which was DHCP on a router. I'm going to switch over to a random web browser on my own computer now, just to show you guys what this looks like. So just 1 second.
A few moments later.
Alright, and here we are on a browser of my choice, folks. So all you need to do is just go to a web browser on a machine that is connected to the network. So if this is your home network, this could be maybe your office network or your client's office network, just go and grab a machine that's currently connected to that specific network. Doesn't matter if it's via network cable or via Wi-Fi. Once you've got a browser open on any one of those machines that is currently connected to that network, you go to the address bar where you would basically go and normally type in the web address for a website, and you simply just go and type in the IP address of your router. Now in my case, the IP is 192.168.0.1. And if I press enter, you'll see it takes me to the portal or page or logon screen of my specific router. Now what this page actually looks like is going to be slightly different for you. It depends on the make, it depends on the model of your router, but the principle still remains the same. You're going to access that router, whatever make or model it might be, by typing in its IP address, and quite frankly, it's probably going to be 192.168.0.1, maybe 1.1. It depends on your network, but that actually is usually what the IP address of the router is. So you're going to go and type that in. It's going to take you to the logon page, whatever it might look like. You're going to type in the username and the password of that respective router, and there you go. You would have access to that router, and you would have access to DHCP on that router. From here, it's just going to be a matter of browsing to DHCP on that router, wherever it might be. Now, I can't tell you exactly when it would be because it differs from router to router. Every make and every model is different, but usually it is very clearly labeled. Now, getting to the second one, which was DHCP on a server. So to make that one a little bit easier to understand, let's switch over to a server environment.
A few moments later.
Alrighty folks, here we are on a server which I've got installed on a virtual machine, but it's besides the point. So you'll see I've already got Server Manager open. So usually if you start a server, Server Manager tends to open automatically. Now should you find yourself in a situation where it's not open already, you can go and open it by just going here to the Start button. It should be in your Start menu. If it's not, might be in this menu. If it's not, you can just go run a search for it. So there's so many ways you can find the Server Manager. Now the point here is, once you've got Server Manager open and if the role has been installed, it should first of all display here on the left hand side, so you can see the role has been installed. It shows here, and if it's installed, you go to the top right hand side in your Server Manager, here to the Tools menu, click on that. There somewhere you'll find DHCP. So that will effectively open the DHCP console. So should I go and click on DHCP? Let me show you guys just briefly what that would look like. That's more or less what it looks like. I'm just going to expand this, just make it a little bit bigger so you guys can get an idea. Expand that, expand that, expand that, and that is more or less what you can expect to find once you've got the DHCP console open. Alright, let us discuss the next topic, which is how do I configure DHCP? Now for this one, let's go back to the router. Here we are back on the router's page. You would remember we had to open a browser. We had to type in the IP address of the router. And once you get here, you just type in your username, which in most cases, quite frankly, is going to be admin. You type in the password of that respective router if you happen to know it. You log into that router. And in my case, you can see that's more or less what I'll have on the left hand side. I've got a menu here on the left. So in your case, it might be at the top. It might look different. The point is that is generally the functionality you'll find on the average router. So what are we looking for again? We're looking for DHCP. So I'm going to go to the left hand side here. You can see mine is clearly marked. In your case, it might not be, but usually it is. I'm going to go click on DHCP there. And you can see clearly that I have DHCP enabled because this router actually happens to be my home router. And you can see what the range is. So should any device connect to my home network, whether it be via cable, whether it be via the wireless network, it doesn't matter. That device, whether it be a desktop, laptop, phone, tablet, whatever, will get an IP address somewhere between 100 and 199. So if I want to go and allocate a static IP address, I should probably go and do that somewhere below 100, something below 100. So if I go and allocate a static IP address, let's say 101, 102, that falls in within this range. So there's a pretty good chance my DHCP on my router might accidentally dish out that IP address to a device, and then there's another device on the network that already has that IP address statically assigned, and we're going to have a conflict, and that's a no-no. So you should generally go and allocate static IPs that's not within the range or the scope of your DHCP server. So you can see I've got about 99 IP addresses, roughly 99 to 100 IP addresses that I can go and allocate to my devices. So there's not that much functionality that you have on a router. I mean, I do have some level of control here. You can see I can go and reserve IPs and all that kinds of jazz. But if you have an actual DHCP on a server environment, you've got way more control over it and way more functionality. That brings us to the second example, which is to show you guys how to configure DHCP on a server. So let me switch back to that server.
A few moments later.
Okay, here we are back on my server. Not sure if you would have noticed, but I actually went ahead and removed the DHCP server role. Now, I did that obviously off camera, so there was a bit of a pause in between that you guys obviously would not have noticed unless I told you about it. And the reason I removed it is because I need to show you from the start how you actually get DHCP. It doesn't just help I just jump in the middle now, does it? So for you to have DHCP, you're going to have to do what? Install a role. Which role? The DHCP role. Now, how you add that role is up to you. You can either go click here where it says add roles and features on the server manager, or you can go to the top right hand side where it says manage on your server, and you can go and say add roles and features. It's the same. Potato, potato, tomato, tomato. I'm going to go click there, add roles and features. I'm going to go click here where it says next. Next. Not going to explain all of that because this is not a server course. The topic is DHCP here after all. If you'd like to know more about the server side of things, feel free to go watch one of my server courses on my channel. I'm going to go here to next once more. It's going to present you with a list of all the roles that's available. Roles that might have been already installed, you'll see normally has like a tick. You'll see it says installed. You can see I've got Active Directory installed, I've got DNS installed, and so on and so forth. Now what we want to go and install is what? DHCP. You can see where it is. So obviously all that's left to do here is just to go and tick that box there. It says DHCP. Now what's going to happen here is it's going to automatically go and tick any features or select any features that may or may not be required, or that normally goes hand in hand with DHCP, or that complements DHCP. It's not compulsory that you go and use that. It's just very nice in the sense of maybe I have no cooking clue what I'm doing when it comes to server, or maybe when it comes to this specific role. So isn't it nice if they automatically select any features, you can think of them as add-ons, that tends to go hand in hand with DHCP. So I'm just going to go and say add features. If you don't know what you're doing, I would say just go click on add features, click on next. Now it takes you to the list of features. So normally you would have to now go and click on any features that you think you might need with DHCP or whatever role you're choosing. In our case, they automatically ticked those features for us. So I'm just going to leave this as is. Then I go and say next, next, install, and that is the end of it. So I'm going to click on install here. Now it's not necessarily going to pop up with a prompt once it's done. It's just going to keep loading this bar, and it's going to be a very small message that's going to say successful or done in most cases. So you need to keep an eye on it. This could take 1 minute, it could take 5 minutes, it could take 10 minutes. It depends on how fast your server is, how beefed up your server is, and obviously it depends on what role you install. So I'm going to do a bit of a quick time lapse here for you guys just to speed things along. So here we go.
One eternity later.
And we're back. Now as you can see, the bar is now blue, it's full, and it actually says configuration required, installation succeeded. So the role has been installed. It actually popped up here on the side. So as it finishes here on the bar, you'll see it pop up here. And I think, yeah, it pops up on the back here as well. So DHCP popped up here, it popped up there, and now it needs configuration because it's not set up in any way. The role has been installed, but nothing has been configured yet. So we still need to go and configure what the range is. You may or may not need to go and configure things like reservations, exclusions, all kinds of jazz like that. So let's jump right to it. I'm going to close this up. You'll see here, that's the notification section on server. It shows us that something needs to be done here. So if I expand that, it tells us we need to go and complete the DHCP configuration. So it's been installed, but not configured yet. Only now do we actually start with the configuration. So I'm going to click on that sucker. Let's click on that. Opens a little wizard. I'm going to move this out of the way here for us so we can see it nice and clear. Should zoom in for you guys just to make it a little bit easier for you guys to see this menu. I'm going to click on next. I'm going to leave everything as default as it gets. I don't want to confuse people. So let's just go click on commit, close, and there we go. So now we're going to go back to the DHCP console, which we did earlier. I'm going to go here to tools, and there it is again. So during that time when I did not have DHCP installed anymore, it would not have shown in this list until you go and put it back. Now in my case it's back, so I'm going to go click on that to open the console. Alright, here we are back in the console. Going to expand that, expand IP version 4, and there is nothing going on at the moment. So it actually remembers my scope from earlier. Normally you would see nothing here. So generally, let me actually delete this so you guys can see how we did this. Gonna delete that. That is what you would see with a brand new DHCP. That's as default as it gets. So now for you to get a scope, you're going to have to go right click on IP version 4 here. There's an option here, it says new scope. Now for those of you that don't know what a scope is, that is the range. So from where to where are we going to be dishing IPs out? So you would remember earlier in this video when I showed you my router, my scope was from 100 all the way to 199. So 192.168.0.100 all the way to .199, which means I had about 99 to 100 IP addresses available. So I need to go and choose from where to where am I going to be dishing IPs out. How many IPs do I have available? So I'm going to go click there on scope. It's going to start a little wizard here for us. We're going to go click on next. You go give the scope a name. It really doesn't matter in this case since this is just a demonstration. So I'm just going to call this Burning Ice Tech Scope. Realistically, in a company environment, you would go and give this a proper name. Go click on next. Here I choose the range. So you would remember on my router it was 192.168.0.100 and then 192.168.0.199. There we go. So I can go make it exactly the same, or I can go make it something else. Let's make it exactly the same just for argument's sake. Here you can go and choose your side notation, or in other words, your subnet mask, if you know what that is. More on that later, so that's a video that's still coming up, so stay tuned for that. Remember to subscribe if you haven't done that, otherwise you might miss that video. I'm going to click on next. And then here we have got a page that says add exclusions. Now you don't have to fill anything in here, you can just go and click on next. But in most companies, there's a very good chance you are probably going to go and end up adding some sort of exclusion here. Now, if you don't know what an exclusion is, that range we just specified. Let me go back to the previous page. This range from 100 to 199. If there's any IPs within that range that I do not want dished out to some device for whatever reason, you can now go and exclude them on this page here. Now, the reason why some of these IPs might not need to be dished out is because you statically apply them, or in other words, manually apply them to some sort of device. This is most commonly going to be something like a server, might be a printer, a scanner, an access point, but in my experience, it's normally some sort of server. So if you've got a server that's got an IP address, you do not want that IP to be dished out to some other random device because that's going to cause all kinds of shenanigans. So I might want to go and say 192.168.0. Remember, what was our range? Our range was from 100 to 199. So what falls within that range? I'm just going to say 120. So for argument's sake, 120 has been allocated to some sort of device. I'm going to say 192.168.0 and then 120 again. You just add the same IP twice. You say add, and you can see that IP has been excluded now. If you've got more than one IP you want to exclude, if they follow back to back, then it's quite easy. You can literally just go and do this, 192.168.0, let's say from 125. So from 125 all the way to 150, I can just go and do something like this. So if I add 150 in there, it's going to exclude 5 IPs. You just go and see there, it's going to exclude 5 IPs as is. You can see it looks slightly different. But if I have 5 IPs and they do not follow back to back, you're going to have to add them one by one by one, and it gets quite excruciating. So I'm just going to go and leave it like that, just for argument's sake. Why not? I'm just going to click on next. Lease duration. You remember earlier in this video we spoke of lease. So when a device of some sort obtains an IP from the DHCP, whether it be from your router, whether it be from an actual server like this one, it normally only lasts a certain period. You would remember I said the default for most companies is 24 hours. In other words, 1 day. You'd see on the server the default's 8 days. So I'm going to go make that less. The default best practice in most companies is 1 day. There we go. So you can make it 1 day, you can make it less, you can make it more. The reasons behind that is something for a different video entirely. So we're going to leave it on the default for now. I'm going to click on next. Configure DHCP options now. I'm just going to say later. Next. We're just going to get down to the straight stuff. Finish. And there we go. We've got our first scope. Most companies, the average company, only have one scope. You can have more than one if you really want to. Now, at this point in time, that's all I actually need to show you guys. But just for fun facts, you would notice there's a little white circle in this folder here. I'm going to zoom in for you guys. You can see it a little bit more clearly. Hopefully that helps. It's a little white circle with a little red or black arrow. It's usually red that points downwards. So in a little white circle, there's a little red arrow that points downwards. What does that mean? It means this scope is not active yet. You can think of this as a gun that's got a safety switch on it that's turned on. The weapon will not fire if the safety is on. So what do you need to do here? You need to go and turn the safety off. So in other words, I need to go and activate this scope. That actually is a question they normally ask in the server exams. Not something you guys need to worry about since you are not writing the server exams. You are writing the CompTIA Network Plus certification exam. So if I need this thing to actually work or kick in, so to speak, I need to activate it. How do I do that? You right click on it and you go click on activate. That's basically going to turn that sucker on. Now you might wonder, but why is it not turned on by default? It is because sometimes we just want to go and test something. It's used for testing purposes and all kinds of other shenanigans. Alright folks, I hope you've learned something, and if you have, please do me a favor and give the video a like. It lets me know that you've enjoyed the video, that you've liked the video, it helps me boost the video. And if you would like to know when the next lesson in this course comes out, remember to hit that subscribe button with the notification bell, otherwise you're not going to know. And then like usual, just a special thank you and shout out to the sponsors of this channel. So thank you very much guys for sponsoring this channel. We've got a few Patreon sponsors, we've got a PayPal sponsor. Thank you goes out to those guys. Alright folks, I will see you in the next lesson of the CompTIA Network Plus course.